the combination of the stretch provision and a buyout. That move would save them $100 million. Stephen A., what are you hearing about his future?
Well, obviously that, he's not going to be in Oklahoma City. And initially, myself included, along with a bevy of others, were under the impression that L.A., here he comes. Simply because LeBron is there, simply because he has a home in L.A. and he's had one for several years or what have you. And then I was reminded before my radio show on ESPN started by somebody very close to him, Houston would have the edge even over L.A. First of all, as close as he is with LeBron, he's closer with CP3, number one. Number two, there was a relationship that was already cultivated there when he wanted to end up there last year because he thought he was going to Houston. It's just that Houston couldn't get the New York Knicks to take Ryan Anderson's 3 years, $60 million contract left on the table. That's what it was worth on his contract. They couldn't get the Knicks to bite on that. That's why that deal never happened. Otherwise, Melo would have been in Houston last year. He also cares about his money. There's no state income tax in the state of Texas. Houston is in the state of Texas. So all of those things contribute. And at the end of the day, when you see what they did without him, that they went to the conference finals of Game 7, when you recognize the fact that there's no longer a Trevor Ariza there, who because of CP's 3-4-year, $160 million commitment to Houston, combined with Clint Capella's scheduled to get an exorbitant amount of dollars as well, they had to let go of Trevor Ariza. He signs a 1-year, $15 million deal with Phoenix. As a result, it opens up a slot at the small forward spot, which was the original position Melo starred in before OKC asked him to transition to the 4 position, which did not work out for him. So you take all of those things into consideration. The only hiccup potentially would be Mike D'Antoni, who once coached Melo in New York, who really didn't want Melo. He wanted to keep Danilo Gallinari and Wilson Chandler and all of those guys, as opposed to trading them to Denver for Carmelo Anthony. But James Dolan and those boys weren't having that, and they brought Melo there, and a relationship with D'Antoni never meshed, primarily because of those reasons. Melo knew the man never wanted him to begin with. But this isn't New York. This is Houston. And D'Antoni has obviously been very, very successful there, along with his system, with Harden and Chris Paul being the face of it. So all Melo would have to do is get there, ingratiate himself into that situation, which would be facilitated by his best friend in Chris Paul. And I think that Houston right now is perceived as a team that has the edge over everybody else.
I would be shocked if Carmelo landed in Houston. He had a hard time being kind of a catch-and-shoot guy with the Thunder. And with Houston, that's what he'd have to be. Now, I do acknowledge that there were 2 guys who used Carmelo very well on offense when they were at the Olympics on the Dream Team, the sequel. And that was Chris Paul and LeBron James. So either Houston or the Lakers would make sense from that point of view, because both those guys seem to know how to play with Carmelo in a way that allowed Carmelo to show his skill, to use his offensive repertoire without slowing up the offense, without having everyone else wait around for the ball. But Houston has a system that works so well that they really should have beaten the Warriors. They had a Game 7 at home, didn't play with CP3, one of their 2 best players, missed every 3-point shot they took. That's barely hyperbole. And they still only lost by single digits. I don't think you mess with something like that by bringing in a guy who needs the ball and was unable to play in a modern offense in OKC. I'd be very surprised, not to mention the D'Antoni issue, if Carmelo wound up in Houston. I do think he could easily wind up with the Lakers, because the Lakers would have to do nothing to acquire him. He wouldn't cost them much if there was a buyout. I don't know what it would be, Stephen A. You would know better than I'm sure, by talking to people, some kind of mid-level exception or something like that.
Max, you don't think that front court's already too crowded there in L.A., that basketball-wise it makes sense?
Well, maybe, except that Carmelo is a special offensive player in the sense that he has a refined all-around offensive game that a guy like LeBron could make good use of. And when you think of the talent on LA, you don't have to give up anything for Carmelo except a little bit of money. So now all of a sudden, you got Rondo to go with LeBron. I mentioned Josh Hart and the things he can do. You still have Ingram. You still have Kuzma. Now you add Carmelo. By the way, they have KCP, who shot very well and has defensive potential. They're just Lonzo. You have all these pieces, many of whom have actual trade value. So yes, you have a surplus, but that surplus would indicate to me you could use it. You could use some of those young upside pieces to get something else you want.
Yeah.
The point is, Carmelo doesn't cost you anything in treasure or draft picks or anything.
Well, Carmelo's not costing you anything no matter where he goes at this particular juncture unless somebody out there is willing to trade for him. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to find a situation where the a stretch situation is invoked. Oklahoma City is going to use that along with the buyout clause to get him up out of there. He's going to accept less than the money he was scheduled to make, knowing that he's going to make up for it with a veteran minimum or a mid-level exception. And when you look at the fact that Trevor Ariza is already gone, Max, the front court for the Houston Rockets has already been messed with. It's already been compromised because you had to pay CP3 and take care of Clint Capella. The fact that those two players are such a priority and you had to take care of them, that is what has already compromised your front line. Then you take into account what we last saw in Game 7. Game 7 amongst the starters, James Harden and Eric Gordon, Trevor Ariza. Trevor Ariza was 0 for 9 from 3, 0 for 12 for the field, minus 15 on the floor. James Harden was 2 of 13 from three-point range. Eric Gordon was 2 of 12 from three-point range. That's 4 for 34 shooting from three-point range. And when you talk about how Melo will stop the ball, catch and shoot, whatever scenario that you want to point to, one of the things people were lamenting as they watched Houston is that they did a lot of it with CP3 and James Harden. But apparently in D'Antoni's system, where volume shooting is okay, remember they shot 7 of 44 from three-point range overall in that Game 7. That's 15%. This is a man that will bench you for not shooting the basketball. So the concerns that you would have about Carmelo anywhere else, I don't know if they're applicable with this D'Antoni's team and this D'Antoni system.
I don't know. Well, you make a good point about maybe you needed someone who could do more than 3 and D, which is what Trevor Ariza is. Trevor Ariza is the classic, the quintessential 3 and D guy who can switch and stuff in the modern NBA. But that's the opposite of Carmelo. It's one thing to say, hey, if Trevor Ariza was better at getting his own shot, he'd have been more valuable in that Game 7 where everyone missed every shot from outside just about. And so Carmelo may help you there. But Carmelo's the opposite of a 3 and D guy. He's not good on the catch and shoots. He was miserable in OKC. And in terms of the defense, we know he can't defend small forwards. And he's not a guy you think of, oh, he's going to switch on guys and everything. So and then Stephen A., considering the D'Antoni experience that Carmelo had as a ball stopper, as kind of the opposite of what D'Antoni's looking for, I find it hard to believe he winds up in Houston.
Well, the D'Antoni system was about 8 years ago, number one. Number two, we have to look at the team as presently constructed. The fact of the matter is playing with Russell Westbrook is a tad bit different than playing with CP3. And so we have to look at it from that perspective. Plus, we have to take into account the fact that Melo was playing a 4 all year long. Now he'll be playing the 3 if this were to happen. So all of those things give me reason to believe that Melo, it's not like this is a brother averaging 3 points a game. Melo had a very, very down year. Melo certainly wasn't himself. And he was still good for 15 to 17 a night. We got to remember that this is a career 24-point-per-game scorer who can hit the shot from three-point range, who can score off the dribble, who can do things the P.J. Tuckers and the Trevor Arizas of the world simply can't do offensively. I don't think we get to ignore that.
Yeah. Certainly a prolific scorer. All right, guys, let's leave it there. Coming up, the latest on the Kawhi Leonard saga, including a change in where he wants to play. We'll debate that next on First Take. Stay here. Hey, Kawhi is broadening his search for a new team. ESPN Spurs reporter Michael C. Wright said on the back-to-back podcast that Kawhi's focus has changed due to LeBron's commitment to the Lakers because Kawhi does not want to be second fiddle to LeBron. Stephen A., should Kawhi want to play for the Clippers?
Well, first of all, that's not what I'm hearing.
Okay.
I have not heard that at all. If you recall a few weeks ago, I did talk about how, Kawhi playing in Los Angeles, he's not about the glitz and glamour, the paparazzi type atmosphere. If somebody said that that was the cause, then that would be different. But saying that he doesn't want to play second banana, meaning that he wants the ball, he wants to be the number one offensive option, I'm not sure that that's the reason that is so important to him. Having said all of that, I've also reported that Kawhi Leonard has made it very clear, even though the Lakers are his preference, if that doesn't work out, fine. He is willing to be a Clipper so long as he's in Los Angeles. He doesn't mind. He would prefer the Lakers, but the Clippers are fully aware that he wouldn't mind them if the Lakers scenario did not work out. That is why the Clippers have been behind the scenes, hoping, praying, and in their own subtle ways, attempting to manipulate San Antonio, sort of doing everything it could to hold off on sending Kawhi to the Los Angeles Lakers. Because if indeed they hold off and the Clippers are in a position next summer where Kawhi Leonard is still on the open market and they have the max contract dollars to pay him, they believe their chances are incredibly legitimate to land him in with the Clippers, because he does not care for all that glitz and glamour and paparazzi type lifestyle and all of that stuff. All Kawhi wants to do is get the hell out of San Antonio and end up in L.A. That's it. Whether it's for the Lakers or the Clippers, he can stomach it so long as he returns home. That is what I have been told.
I just don't believe the report. It's not that I don't believe the reporting. I do.
Sure.
But I don't believe the report itself that Kawhi doesn't want to play second fiddle. Look, Kawhi Leonard is an all-time great player. Stephen A., he may be one of the top 4 or 5 small forwards I've ever seen. You know, I think, or even like wing players, two-way wings. I think Jordan and Kobe and LeBron, obviously. And then who else am I sure I would put ahead of Kawhi? Dr. J, not in the NBA, obviously in the ABA, but I didn't see that. I'm trying to, Scottie Pippen is around there. Like, I'm talking about, he's one of the greatest ever, but no one's ever going to confuse him for the greatest player of all time. But you know what? Lots of folks confuse LeBron for the greatest player of all time. It's a confusion. Jordan's the greatest ever, but LeBron may be number 2. Certainly he's in the top 5, right? Most in the top 3 with Kareem and Jordan. LeBron's just better than everybody. That doesn't mean you play second fiddle with LeBron. If LeBron has a scorer on his team, you think he's not going to use him? LeBron's basically your point forward, if not guard, right? So what's Kawhi really? He's a perfect complementary piece. In a sense, so is LeBron. He'll do what the team needs. I don't think it's just self-serving, well, LeBron just wants the ball in his hands. No, I think usually that's in the best interest of the team. And Kawhi, too, like, I find it ridiculous that Kawhi would, I only want to be, like, what fiddle he plays, first or second is important to him. Maybe to his uncle, maybe to someone around him, maybe to business associates, but to Kawhi Leonard, have people seen the way he plays defense? And even the way his offensive game came about, do you know what that requires? It requires an incredible work ethic, incredible competitiveness, incredible discipline. Because he's not like one of these freelance gambling players on defense. He's an incredibly disciplined player on defense. That just doesn't jive with the kind of guy who thinks to himself, I don't want to play second fiddle to LeBron. Kawhi Leonard just doesn't seem to be. Now, the Clippers are another case. Why do I think the Clippers are viable? Jerry West. Because Jerry West is probably the greatest executive in the history of the NBA. So he's advising the Clippers. I don't put anything past Jerry West. He might get his man in the end. But I'm looking at the Clippers. What do they have to offer? They don't have any assets worth anything. The Lakers, it's not that they have the most assets, Boston does. But the Lakers have the most young, good, ascending assets that they're willing to part with. No one else who has those kind of assets seems willing to part with them. And even if the Clippers were willing, they don't have the assets. I don't see how Jerry West could prove me wrong. He's the greatest ever, as I said. I don't see how the Clippers land him. I think the Lakers either get him now in a trade or later in free agency. Well,
the Clippers are not trying to land him now. They recognize the fact that they've got to get their salary down to about $60 million. And at that particular moment in time, they anticipate that they'll have enough money to offer a max contract to a player. And they expect the guy to be available as Kawhi Leonard. Their only hope is not about trying to offer anything now because they know they don't have the assets. What they're hopeful of is that Kawhi won't land with the Lakers in that span, that San Antonio won't cave and give him away to the Lakers, or that, that somehow, some way his arrival to the Lakers can be derailed in time for them to legitimately compete with the Lakers for his services. Because where somebody would say, well, we've got LeBron and we're the Lakers and this is Laker Nation and Laker Town, and listen, they're second fiddle, they're our fair weather stepchild and what have you. The Clippers can make the argument, literally can make the argument, yep, we're all of those things. Seems to be exactly the kind of environment you want, Kawhi. How about it? And they'd have a chance that he'd say yes, simply because his personality gears or veers towards something like that. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, let's keep in mind, though, the Spurs said that they wouldn't trade him to the West if they do trade him. And then if we're going East, it'd be interesting to see if he'd be open to a team like New York. I'm talking if we're going into 2019.
Yeah.
But, guys, Woj is also reporting that free agent guard Tony Parker has agreed to a 2-year, $10 million deal with Charlotte. Parker ending his 17-year run in San Antonio that included 4 NBA championships. Parker ranks first in assists, second in games and minutes, third in field goals, fifth in steals and free throws. And a source just reported that Greg Popovich, he called him in the last hour to inform him of the decision to accept the Charlotte offer. Guys, so, Max, I'll start with you on this. With the eventual departure of Kawhi and now this, Max, is this the official end of the Spurs era?
Yeah, I think it is. Normally, again, the way I said Jerry West is the greatest executive of all time. Popovich may be, who else as an executive / coach since Red Auerbach can compare to Greg Popovich? He's incredible, and everyone loves everything about him, on and off the court. Not everything about him, but, they love what he represents, the way he's been a real American leader in a time of need, actually, at least as a public figure. The things he said, he's outspoken, he's righteous, and love Popovich. But given his age, given where the franchise is in terms of resources, draft picks, etc., I know they got Kawhi not with a top pick. They could identify a hidden jewel and polish it over several years, and maybe the Spurs will be right back to where they were. But given Popovich's age, and given what it looks like the Spurs have in the cupboard, which to me, it doesn't look bare, but it doesn't look plentiful either, I think that the Kawhi situation, more to the point of it, but also maybe symbolically, the Tony Parker situation represents the end of an era. Guys, it's the right move for the Spurs. I don't know why they paid Pau Gasol and kept him around, but they shouldn't pay Tony Parker at this point. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's a former Finals MVP. But given his age and the kind of player he is now, they're right to move on from him. But I think symbolically, it does kind of represent the end, certainly, of the last Spurs era, but maybe even of the Popovich era as, the Spurs, this perennial team that could win the championship any year.
Stephen A., before you jump in, let me just add, Woj also reporting that the Spurs did want Parker back, but Parker will take on a significant role with the Hornets, apparently behind Kemba Walker.
Well, he's going to take on a more significant role, Molly, because he's going to play more minutes and he's going to make more money. The Spurs weren't going to pay him $10 million a year, and more importantly, they weren't going to play him more than the 19 minutes per game that he got last year. DeJounte Murray is the new point guard for the San Antonio Spurs. They got a lot of love for him. He's got nice height on him, nice length on him. He's shown some ability as well, and that goes a long way. But I agree with Max in terms of this being the end of an era, and I'll tell you why. The era began not just because of David Robinson, but primarily with the arrival of Tim Duncan. And it wasn't just because of Tim Duncan's greatness. It's because Tim Duncan bought whatever Greg Popovich and the Spurs organization was selling. And so because of that, that's what enabled Greg Popovich to become who he was. Whether as great of a man as I know him to be, when you look at stuff for the media purposes, how truculent he could come across and whatever the case may be, those are the kind of things that, you couldn't pull that off unless you were winning, and you couldn't pull that off unless you had somebody like Tim Duncan who always sided with you, stood by your side, and allowed you to coach him. I recall one time when I was covering the Sixers and Larry Brown and Allen Iverson were getting into it, and Allen Iverson got benched for showing up late to a practice one day. That night, Greg Popovich benched Tim Duncan because Greg Popovich and Larry Brown were that close. Tim Duncan hadn't done anything wrong, but Greg Popovich sat him on the bench anyway because he wanted to show that indeed stars can be benched. You don't just sit up there and throw somebody out there and let anybody circumvent rules and regulations just because they're the marquee. There must be order. Greg Popovich was a protege of Larry Brown's. He did it just to help Larry Brown send that kind of message at that particular moment in time. At least that's what I was told by Larry Brown and confidants of Larry Brown. So what you have is a situation where once upon a time that could happen. In this day and age, players have more control than ever before, more control of their own destiny and destination than ever before. And when you have one of the elite players in the game who is as mild-mannered and as low-key as they come, still wanting to depart from the Riverwalk in San Antonio to go to Los Angeles, that is a problem. And then also we forget this. How many times did we talk on this show about how much LeBron James loves and reveres Greg Popovich, considers him an incredible coach, an incredible basketball mind. He has an incredible amount of love for Greg Popovich. I didn't see San Antonio on his list of destinations. He wasn't going there. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you can love, respect, and revere Greg Popovich and truly appreciate the greatness and the first-class status that the San Antonio Spurs have held for years. But in the end, are you clamoring to go there if you get the choice to choose your destination as a free agent? 99% of the time, the answer is no for the truly marquee guys. And that's the difference.
Max,
you don't have that anymore.
Before you jump in here, I just want to welcome everybody as we cross the 5 o'clock hour here into our First Take afternoon special. Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith, Molly Kerriman. Obviously, we're discussing if this is an end of the era for the Spurs with Kawhi wanting out and Parker now leaving. Max?
Yeah, the question is, did the era end with Tim Duncan, really? I mean, look, Kawhi Leonard, they were up 20 points, 23 points on the Warriors at the half when Kawhi got hurt in Game 1. But none of us believed that the Spurs were going to actually beat the Warriors. We figured they might extend after seeing that first half of basketball, 6 games, something like that. But Tim Duncan was a uniquely great player. You mentioned his personality and what he accepted from Popovich, much in the same way as great as Belichick is, and I sing Belichick's praises, much like Popovich, as not just a great coach, but a great GM, right? And I brought up Red Auerbach. Also, he had Bill Russell. Popovich had Tim Duncan. Obviously, Belichick has Tom Brady. These on-the-court kind of extensions of the coach/GM, the player leaders. There are very few players throughout history like Bill Russell or Tim Duncan or Tom Brady. So as much as I credit Popovich, a lot of it may have been, Popovich was fortunate. He had a guy like Duncan. Duncan's gone, and I don't think it's coincidental that it seems to fall apart in his absence.
We got to leave it there, guys. Still to come here on this First Take afternoon special, does LeBron's move to L.A. mean that Magic's Lakers are now on the same level with the Rockets? The fellas' answer might surprise you. That's next.